Good day, Dragon Slayers. Today, once again, I'm delighted to be joined by my partner, Jessica. Uh, Jessica is a brilliant student of all sorts of things who I've come to see as a repository of wisdom that go way beyond her 22 years.
So close. So close.
Okay. And if you like this podcast and want to read more about the way we think, at least the way I think, we have a book, Dragon Slaying, which apparently just won an Amazon bestseller badge. For those of you out there who may be overly impressed with this, apparently, to get this badge, you must be among the top 100 books in a given period for self help. So we're right there. And I will assure you, I am making precious little money on this book right now, but I want to get the message out there. Last month, I received a royalty check from Amazon to the tune of $7, which when I presented it to the Starbucks place, they turned me down. Okay. On a more serious note, Jessica and I first came together on the subject of suicide. Both of us through several experiences, mine professional and having lost several patients to suicide, fortunately few over the past years as a psychiatrist, but nonetheless, one of them was Jessica's husband, former husband, who died tragically from a suicidal impulse. When we look at suicide stats in this country, be aware that from the year 2000 to the year 2023-24, suicide rates have increased by 50%. That is from roughly 10 per 100,000 to up to 15 per 100,000. And that likely doesn't include deaths that were allegedly accidental but may have been provoked by high risk behavior. So this is a serious issue. And one of the things that we look at is what are the correlates of this? Well, one of the correlates is the increasing frequency of children who are born to a single parent family. We know that healthy two parent families are an ideal environment within which to raise a child, assuming the support by an integrated supportive community, which also is less likely to occur in the year 2025 than it did in the year 2020, and certainly in the post-war years of 1945, 1950. In addition, there's a drifting away from faith. Well, why is this important? Well, believe it or not, when we send our kids to Sunday school, and we go to church or synagogue, or if we go to the mosque, we learn the basic principles of living and living righteously. And those principles hold in common a number of values, but it imposes and introduces the child to the notion of morality, which, for the most part, is a decent guidepost for the child as the child matures. Now, Jessica, you're the student of this. Tell me more about how do we get faith?
Ooh, I am a student of this because I'm not a personal experiencer of faith in the same way that people that I'm surrounded by are. I have a friend. We went to the same church growing up. She was actually one of the friends that introduced me to going to church. I met her in kindergarten. I had never gone to church before kindergarten, and I was jealous that they got to go. I wanted to spend all my time with this family. And they were two sisters and their mom, and they are still my family. They're still people that I consider. And I told my mom I want to go to church with them, and we went to church. And after I got to church, we were members of an Episcopalian church. I loved it. I had fun, and I wanted to join, and I was baptized into it. But I never felt the same pull. So once I became, a tween or a teenager, I didn't want to go to church anymore. It wasn't fun. It wasn't as exciting. And my friend did. And to this day, she's very religious. She goes to church every Sunday. She is a member of a non denominational Christian church, and she feels faith. And I don't. There are moments where, she talks about the love of Jesus and the love of God. And I hear those things and I understand them, but I don't feel them the same way that other people would. And I am not a member of a church anymore. That church since closed. So I'm fascinated by the idea of why do other people feel faith and why am I just interested in it? So I studied religion at Santa Clara University, and it was my passion. I loved it. I love all forms of religion. I think that all forms of religion have some aspect of truth to them. And I say all forms of religion, but there are obviously dangerous cults and things out there that are perverting the sense of faith and truth out there. So take that with a grain of salt. But I believe that all religions have something valuable to them. And because I don't feel faith the same way, I have looked at other people with the same question of what do you get from being atheist? And what do you lose from being atheist? And what do you get from being religious? And what do you lose from it? And in the case of, and I promise that my actual argument is I think we all need to find our own version of faith, whatever it is. We need to have our own religion and we need to have our own connection with the divine in some way. And I have so much research that I've done trying to understand why and how and what does the science say about this. But I will start with the caveat that my late husband was religiously traumatized and it broke his ability to feel faith. He could not experience awe, he did not connect with the divine. And because he grew up in a household that forced religion on him and did not acknowledge his own personal beliefs, it broke him of that. So when we talk about important things like suicide and faith and religion aren't the cure. They are one aspect of it. And it is important to find your faith, but it's also important when you're raising children, which is kind of the topic that Dr. Tom and I intended to talk about today, is when you're raising children and when you're working with children, you have to be careful that what you are teaching them and what you're showing them connects with them in some kind of way. And that's the important aspect of faith and religion is connection to something bigger than ourselves and the world around us. And if your faith and your religion isn't teaching your children that, if you have a punitive religion, if you are harsher on your punishments, you're probably not teaching your children that. And you can tell if they don't want to go and they don't want to be there, you have to give them a few years of finding their own autonomy and looking for those sources. And this morning I was reading an article that was published in 2007, and it did say that religion is good for mother baby bonding, it's good for father figure bonding with your children. It is overall beneficial unless you're part of, and I won't name the specific religion that they were talking about in the article because I don't want to offend anybody and I also don't want anybody to think that I'm attacking them. But in this article, he spoke about a specific version of faith that was punitive and relied on guilt and punishment. And that pushed children away and was damaging to their relationships with faith, with their parents, with their community. So I think religion is so important. And I have seen many people who don't feel any version of religion or faith, and they have suffered for it. I think Dr. Tom and I have talked about how it increases your rates of anxiety and depression. And I think that if you can't feel appreciation for the world around you and you don't have a sense of religion, then you lack for it. I think that you have a severe disadvantage in life if you don't learn early on or find when you're ready something that helps you connect with the world and feel that it's a good place to be.
Let me offer a perspective of somebody who had a different upbringing. I was raised as a Reformed Jew, and the definition of Reformed Jew is a Jew who can eat bacon. Uh, and I remember this vividly. I remember that one of my parents' favorite dinners was on Sunday to have bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwiches, and uh, we partook liberally in shrimp and things such as this. Well, that aside, it nonetheless provided me some sense of community. And I think one of the distinctions in terms of how faith works is it works better if you take your kids to Sunday school rather than send them. That is, if you yourself are a participant in the process and you model it. Otherwise, it seems like hypocrisy. Well, why aren't you going? I'm too busy for that stuff. Uh, Now, what does it offer? Well, certainly we're schooled in basic principles. Muslim, Christian, or Jew all learn about the Ten Commandments. We all learn about Moses. We all learn about anchoring in a monotheistic God. But when you look around the world and you look at all the suffering and you look at people that have been inflicted with early childhood diseases, you begin to wonder, why could God permit that? And of course, the rabbis and the priests and the ministers say one cannot totally know God's purpose until one understands the hereafter. Well, that's kind of a hard contract. Where I came to this was the understanding as a cultural anthropologist that what works in a culture is what I refer to this in the book, a universal organizing myth. That is, we don't know for sure anything out there, but if we can adhere to a myth that works for us, a heroic myth that includes proximity to our God, it's helpful as we take on the challenges of living. And I remarked with my other interviewee, my cousin Michael, who will be interviewing tomorrow. When one reads the Old Testament and you read passages like the 23rd Psalm in particular, you get a sense that David, when he's writing this psalm, is referring to an experience almost as if God is his companion, that God is by his side. And he felt this deep connection to God, which I suspect as you go back to biblical times, people felt because it was ingrained very early in their upbringing. And it was a total cultural phenomenon, that it was a shared belief. It's very much like in some countries, and even in this country on occasion, patriotism is a shared belief for the most part. So that organizes the culture and gives people strength as they proceed along the path toward righteousness, towards morality, towards achievement, toward overcoming obstacles. And if you have God at your side, it's going to be easier to overcome obstacles. Witness the relative success of people achieving sobriety when they're laser focused on the message of the 12-step movement.
So for those of us who aren't familiar with the 12-step movement, will you give us a little bit of insight as to why you reference that? I personally have never gone through the 12-step program, and I know many people who are unfamiliar with it. So you made a reference there, and I think I know what it is, but I'd love to hear you actually explain it.
So what does the 12-step movement do? Well, the 12-step movement first came about by actually a physician, Dr. Bill, who was an alcoholic, who I think sometime in the 30s uh, wrote a book on the 12-step movement. And it provides guidelines to somebody who's recovering from alcoholism. And it actually holds true to some empirical truths. Like, for the most part, once your brain has been programmed by alcohol, it's going to be very difficult to return to drinking. Some people talk about rational recovery, which enables drinking, but it's a hard sell. That my view of the best way to recover from alcohol is you look at alcohol as potentially a lethal allergy that you have, and you don't go back to it. Period. Could kill you. Uh, and in that, there are components that involve understanding what impact alcohol has had on your life, has had on your morality, your relationships, your work, your purpose, and so on. Get a sense that it's unhealthy. But the most important part about this is community. That is, if you're involved in the AA movement and you participate, you're part of a sobriety community, which is incredibly important. Because if you think about all the social cues associated with alcohol use, and one cannot watch the Super Bowl with not getting the message that if you drink a certain brand of beer, you're more likely to hook up with a beautiful lady like Jessica
You're not.
than if you're. But, that is the image. You see all these beautiful people out there at a bar having a great time. And then when you go into the same bar, you find people with beer bellies drinking alone that are quite sad, morose. So the image is very different than the reality. Uh, so I think that is a message. Other people have other paths. What I tell my patients, and no matter what path you take, you need to be anchored in a sober community. It's very difficult to be sober if everyone about you are indulging. So you become part of a community of purpose, which is another thing that I think holds us together when we talk about people of faith. Typically, faith communities have some purpose beyond just prayer. And they look at serving God in a variety of ways, most importantly, in serving their own community and then extending beyond that. And then teaching compassion. For example, I don't think we would have had a successful abolitionist movement or a successful civil rights movement without the power of the faith community. Witness obviously MLK was himself a minister. Yeah.
Yeah, and uh, I think that the aspect of being called to God is important, but someone who doesn't feel that, an atheist, maybe someone who has had some trials in life, I think that there are other reasons why you go. And science is starting to unpack them. Science is starting to prove what religion has known for many, many years. There's now studies that are very reliable, very tried and true, saying that meditation, which comes from the Hindu and the Buddhist religious faiths, teaches compassion. There was a study done that I was listening to Professor David Destano this morning. I think yeah, David Destano, who wrote the book and has a podcast, both titled "How God Works." And he is a behavioral scientist that studies what does religion do. And he admits that he's cherry picking from religion because he says, I want to find what is good about religion and I want to bring that into everybody's lives if he can. And he studied meditation, and he said he did a great study, and he found that after having people who were interested in meditation be on a wait list and then be part of a meditation group where they learned how to meditate over, I believe, 8 weeks. So a short period of time. They then went in for a memory test because everybody wants to believe that meditation helps your memory, which it does. And he found that of the people who had not been taught how to meditate but were still interested in meditation, they had an instance of being kind 15% of the time, a spontaneous act of kindness. And the example that he had was in a waiting room. There were actors, and an actor came in with crutches and a broken leg, and the other actors in the room were instructed to ignore them. And 15% of the time, the person in the waiting room would stand up and offer their chair. Very simple act of kindness, very easy to find if you live somewhere with public transport. That act of kindness, it doesn't happen. 15% of the time was the base for people who intended to do this. And the group that had learned meditation, 50%, 50, stood up and offered their seat. So just meditating alone made you a more compassionate, kind person. But there's also instances in the behavioral science where they're proving out that going to church, regardless of if you believe in the church, if you believe and have that investiture of emotion, if you stand up and sit down and you sing the same songs as other people, it increases your sense of belonging and community, and it decreases your sense of loneliness. So just showing up and participating makes you a less lonely person. Dr. Tom, can you talk about loneliness for a minute and let us know why we want to avoid being lonely?
No, just 1 second. I want to pick up on the community sport. I believe that we are charitable and kind because the whole act of being charitable and kind gives us a rush, brings us closer to the community. I'll tell you a funny story. A few years ago, the American Psychiatric Association, I think, had a convention or a meeting. I don't recall the circumstances. I was politically active at that time in the association, but it was in New Orleans, Louisiana. great town. Just it has wonderful music, wonderful cuisine, and beautiful, beautiful architecture if you want to visit it. So I'm on this trolley, I believe, and I'm all duded up with my suit, and I'm going to a restaurant which is out, I believe, somewhere near a park, right across the street from, I believe, Tulane University. Beautiful, I think, great park. And there are a variety of restaurants out there. And I'm supposed to have exact change to get on this trolley or this bus. And I'm searching through my pockets, and there is no way to get change. So I wave, a $5 bill around, and nobody had the exact change for $5, but the people took up a collection to to give whatever it was, the 25 or 50 cents of exact change that got me on the bus. And they applauded me as I got on. So, that is a sense of community that can occur with that level of generosity and warmth. Uh, so, what about loneliness? Well, loneliness and despair is, I think, an antecedent to sadness and suicide. You don't, being alone is horrible. And I think it's one of the issues in aging. As people age, in fact, I just received an email from one of my dear old high school friends, a guy with whom I used to play tennis, and he was remarking on how he not only lost another tennis team member, lost another classmates, and he had a spreadsheet of whatever happened to our classmates, and now at advanced age, a fair number, maybe as many as 50%, are gone. So as you age, you're losing more and more attachments. You lose attachments to a partner, should a partner die, and it's incredibly important that we take care of people who are alone. I mean, we could do wonders in preventing suicide by just making certain that we have avenues for community in our own communities. That is, we invite people to participate. Uh, Reno has, I think, a number of wonderful options, including OLLI, the Oxner Lifetime Learning Institute, where people can gather together and learn stuff. There are meetups and so on, where people can go hiking, Sierra Club. But there are a variety of avenues where people get together. I have patients where they've been able to discover coffee houses that play board games.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there are music venues. I happened to go to one on Wednesday night that was fun. So if you search, there are opportunities to bond. Uh, One of the ways I bond, and actually coincidentally, the way ultimately you and I met, is I work out regularly at a gym. And most of my buddies working up in the locker room after many years have become friends. Uh, and you just, see each other, you introduce each other, you work out together. Your dad, people can play pickleball and have the shared experience of having your dad wipe their ass on the on the, on the pickleball court, but that's shared suffering, and that actually becomes a part of community. So,
Yeah, I actually, my dad loves pickleball. If you're looking for a sense of community, the pickleball community is so interested in growing. You don't have to be religious to go. You can make pickleball your religion, though. There are shirts and hats and group meetings and text message groups. Pickleball could be your religion. If you're looking for a sense of community, it's there. But I actually
well, they obviously have fun.
Oh, and they have so much fun. And I think that working out, you get so much benefit from working out that you do things together. I actually was listening, and one of my I'll call it rabbit holes. I wrote my honors thesis when I graduated on ritual. I think that ritual is it's one of the foundations of religion, and I think that it's so important. Ritual is actually very hard to define though. You can't actually define what a ritual is because everybody has different rituals. So the most recent definition I listened to on David DeSano's podcast, he was on Ask Psychology podcast and he was discussing it. And he said, ritual is anything you do with intent. And that was the best definition he could come up with because you can't say it's what you do in another group because you can light the menorah for Hanukkah by yourself. You don't have to have a group to do that ritual. Your ritual can be going to the Catholic Church and being having a rosary and saying your Hail Marys. That's a ritual. You could do it in a group. You can do it alone. You can also go to the pickleball court. Your ritual could be going to the pickleball court. And my thesis was that film can be your version of a ritual. You can go to, well, before COVID, you could go to a movie theater, you could sit and watch a sci-fi movie, you could watch a romantic comedy, you silence, everything gets dark, you intend to pour yourself into this moment. I think you can make just about anything your ritual. And I'm going to hold up a book that's one of my favorite books, but I don't encourage anybody else to read it unless this is your thing. And it's Patterns in Comparative Religion. But I actually wanted to hold it up to show you how thick it is. And this is one of many books on this subject that basically says all religions have more in common than they don't. Everybody all across the world finds a sense of the divine or an essence of being a part of something bigger in religion. And we find benefits from things like chants that can lower your heart rate. There are many religions that believe in psychedelic drugs that would find ways to safely go about having that experience. There are so many different ways to find your community and so many different ways for you to engage in this important part of life. We originally, Dr. Tom and I had talked about the benefits in childhood and being raised with religion. So what I did is I pulled up my stepson's Everyday Insights for Kids deck of mindfulness cards. And he also has some mindfulness puzzles. And I thought, well, if anybody is struggling to teach their kid religion because they've been traumatized by it, because they don't have it, you can go to any bookstore and you can find cards that will help teach these principles of community and kindness and being good to yourself and to others. Some of the benefits of religion, you can find them in any bookstore and it doesn't have to be a particular religion. You can still do it. You can do it without, you can do it being agnostic or atheist. They're still there. But I think it's the most vital thing in life is that when you're going through something hard and you're asking those questions, why did this person die? Why did I feel this loss? Why did this abuse happen? And you have to confront the evil in the world. You have to have some kind of framework to bounce yourself up against. You have to have something that makes you do the right thing, even when no one's looking. And some people need God to tell them to do that, and some people don't.
I'd like to respond to that, but you've teased us with so many different
I did.
ideas. But let's just take one in particular, which I think is enormously helpful. Let's talk about mindfulness. What does mindfulness do?
Oh, mindfulness has a huge movement right now in research, in self-help books.
What is mindfulness?
Mindfulness, in my unofficial definition, because I'm not Googling it, would be the ability to focus in one moment on what you're doing and be present in the moment. Uh, Mindfulness would be an experience where you are fully invested in what you're doing at the time. And that comes mostly from a Zen Buddhist perspective. I practice Zen Buddhist meditation, not as often as I should. Sometimes it's every day, sometimes it's not very often. But my version of mindfulness, which is coming from the Buddhist tradition, would teach me that each moment when I am doing something, I should be here, present, and focusing on it. I should not be worrying about the past. I should not be thinking about the future. I should be truly experiencing what's happening to me.
I love the concept, and I attempted to inspire the concept for virtually all my patients. What I find that's key about this is it battles against the arrogance of suffering. What the heck is he talking about? The arrogance of suffering. When you're in suffering and you're in the moment of suffering, you can empower suffering by believing that it has control of all of you and it will always be there. You know, and it's one of the issues in the suicide impulse. I'm always going to be in that space. It makes absolutely no sense. It is not validated by reality if you examine it. So, what mindfulness does is it takes you to a position, it's almost a quasi meditative state, where you get out of this and you realize this is something that you're experiencing, and it almost allows you to observe yourself. So, if I were angry and I got into a mindfulness state, my mindful state will say, Tom, looks like you're angry. Let's examine why you're angry. Or let's look at the phenomenon. And what happens when you're angry? Well, you get tense and your heart rate goes up. It's not a healthy state. Do you want to stay in that state? No. Well, what about such and such? We'll take care of that later. But just observe yourself and decide is this is what you want to do. And then start breathing and reflect. You have a choice. Do you want to hold this state, or would you like to go to a different perspective? And then once you can get into that observing mode, that Zen observer, there's no ego here, you're out of it, then I think it loses its toxicity. The other thing that mindfulness will do is it will give you a sense of how to appreciate great things. Suppose, just visualize, you and I at various times, I'm sure, have taken a hike up Chickadee Ridge. Okay. So we're hiking up Chickadee Ridge, and we ultimately get to a point where we're able to see Lake Tahoe. We're able to see it through the trees. There may be granite boulders around us, but we're reflecting on that image. Well, that's a beautiful image. And we can just take that in, just experience that, get in touch with it. It actually slows down the pace of the hamster wheel in our brain and allows us to take time to pay attention. Okay, now loneliness and overcoming it. I think, as we talked about, we need to seize on opportunities for community. Where does faith come into this? I believe that if you can look upon that organizing myth as something of, if God is in your life, that gives you comfort and perspective and shelters you from the intensity of suffering and accompanies you on your path, it makes you stronger. We talk a lot about the heroic imperative, which is, when we write about this at some point, uh, there is no choice other than the heroic imperative. That is, if you've got a binary choice, every day you can get up and decide, do I need to get up? Why don't I just stay in bed? Every day you say, why do I need to do these things? Well, you need to do these things because it's part of your heroic identity. That is, if I am going to be the person that I aspire to be, I need, as an imperative, to take these steps, whatever it may be. If I decide I want to be healthy, I need to choose healthy foods. That's part of my identity. If I want to be fit, I can't just talk about it. I need to get my butt over to the gym. I need to hike the mountains. I need to use every opportunity I can to become fitter. If I wish to play a sport and do it in an elite way, I can recall when I was a competitive runner, I would not only run distance, but I would go to a local high school stadium and run the track and then run up the stadium steps.
Nobody does that for fun. You have to have a motivation to want to do that. That's not an average idea of a good time. It is if you're an athlete. But I think, yeah, that's a great example. I love that example of your imperative to better yourself. That's an imperative. Nobody runs up stadium steps because they're like, oh, that sounds like a good Tuesday. You have to have a goal. That's a goal.
Great place to meet chicks.
Not very many, I'm guessing. Probably statistically unlikely to meet a lot of people there.
Well, my point is that is part of the heroic ritual. You do that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you do that stuff and you're better for it. And you get the rush of endorphins, you also get the pride of accomplishing whatever your goal is.
Sure. So that is what it takes. It takes, I don't know if I shared this before. Would you guess how many 3-point shots does Steph Curry take in a day?
Oh man, I used to know the answer to this because I lived in the Bay Area.
5 hours.
Oh, that's too many.
He's on that court for 5 hours shooting from beyond the 3-point line. And
And that is why Steph Curry makes the money and the shots that he makes.
but can you imagine that commitment to excellence?
No, I cannot.
And you can and one of the when you look at Michael Jordan and the impact that he had on basketball, not only did it have an impact on Michael, but when his teammates witnessed the intensity and the regularity of his workout rituals, the team got better because they tried.
That's why you need your community. So there's always that one person you can think of, and there was someone in a yoga class I took, and her name was Iris, and I never met her outside of yoga class. But you know what? Every time I did yoga at home by myself, I thought my goal is to be as good as Iris. I want to show up and I want to be as dedicated as her. And she didn't do anything particularly acrobatic. It's not like she was a gymnast. I don't know what her athletic background was, but when I went to yoga, this person, when there was a challenge, she rose and met it. And that was all I wanted. Is I thought, when I'm in yoga and there's a challenge, I want to rise to meet it as much as Iris does. And I got so much better for it. I felt fantastic. I was more consistent. There's always someone in your community that will help you rise to that challenge more and help you in some way save yourself with your heroic transformation, but also help you be a deeper part of that community.
Which also speaks the opportunity to choose your heroes.
Yes, your heroes do not have to be someone that anybody else would find a hero. Your hero just needs to be someone that you would be very proud of to end up like. And right now, I have a fiance, and I live with his son, and we are struggling right now to pick good heroes. And I'm sure that many of the parents out there, hopefully not Dr. Tom, but maybe, can attest to kids picking the wrong heroes. An anime character is not someone that I would consider a good hero. Morally gray, not really a great example. But that's who this kid has picked. My stepson has decided that his heroes are anime, and that's fine. But we're trying to teach him, okay, if these are your heroes, how do you decide if they're good heroes or bad heroes? And what are you going to get out of them? That's a great question. What would you tell your patients who have picked a bad hero?
Well, one of the imperatives that conscious parents have is they want to do all they can to be heroes to their own children. That is, they need to model behavior that the kids will admire. It's important. And it's one of the reasons why I believe healthy parenting transforms the parent as much as it transforms the child.
I read a statistic that moms who work out, and I believe it was primary parent was the intention of the study. So if you are the primary parent, please hear that. But I think that it was moms who work out have a 30 or 35% healthier child. Their child is much more likely to model good physical, healthy behavior. Not because you taught them how to work out, not because you talked about it, but if they saw you working out, they had a 30 to 35% chance increase of living a healthier life when they were adults. That's phenomenal.
So, in closing, I hope we've given you out there lots of ideas. Consider your own heroic path. Consider embracing an organizing myth. And if you have the capacity, include God in your life. Until next time, goodbye, good health. And Jessica, once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
Bye.
having me. It's always fun.